Coverage of DevCom has been brought to you by Xsola. Learn how you can get increased earnings for your game at the end of the video. In the last 24 hours, 3 of those hours were spent with the Steam team. And it's been a pretty eye-opening experience. So I'm here just to share with you what have I learned about Steam, because there's a lot of speculation, of course. Like, we see them change things and we look at all of the games coming out on Steam and we are like immediately going into panic mode of what does this mean? Do we still have a chance, or are the bigger indie games like the triple indies and whatever going to outcompete us? So I came armed with a whole bunch of hot, spicy questions like, what are you going to do about the slop on Steam? I talked to the Steam team directly and I just want to basically give an update on that. So let's start with talking a little bit about how Steam has been doing. Let's start off with that because they had a talk here at DevCom yesterday where they kind of just went through some of the numbers of, is Steam still doing well? What are some things that you as a developer need to care about? And there are a few things here that, of course, they've announced over the past few months. Like, for example, there's been a way bigger focus on the daily deals, for example, where they went from 2 to 4, and now in 2025, they started doing 6 daily deals every single day, making it more self-service and all of that. And unfortunately, this is maybe sad for most of the viewers, probably you're not going to get into the daily deal. You need to earn a decent amount of money for that. There's no magic number exactly, but it seems to hover at around 75,000 general dollars. If you're like over 50k, you can generally send an email to Steam support, and then it's hit or miss, but they'll probably give you still like a slot, maybe. There's no guarantees. Like, if you're over 100k, you generally do get a daily deal pretty easily at some point, which you should utilize because it is a massive boost in terms of visibility and in terms of sales. There's a lot of games that get almost the same amount of sales on like when they do a daily deal as they did on their launch day. Now, this is something that, is not available for everyone because, yeah, sure, it's good visibility, but it's visibility for people who have already been performing pretty well. Another thing that they're doing, and we noticed this as well, is they're doing more and more Steam Fests. And I don't just mean like the sales and then the next fest, for example, but they're doing more of those themed fests as well, like the Idler Fest, the 4X Fest, the Automation Fest and all of that, with the goal of basically, once again, giving more visibility to indie games, because that is going to be the recurring thread here with all of these things. And what are they implementing basically is they want to make more money. And how do they make more money? By showing more games to players on Steam so they can buy more games and we get to give our juicy 30% cut to Steam. And I mean, for the most part, they're pretty benevolent and they are trying to basically allow us to sell more, which is where these fests come in. And one of the things that they did, for example, was I think a few weeks ago, they announced the fests for the first half of 2026, where there's festivals like the Horse Fest, for example, are coming in, and a whole bunch of other festivals, because they noticed that there has been an uptick in terms of spending, basically. The more festivals, the more games are being bought at the end of the day, in the grand scheme of things. Maybe your game won't be bought as much, but in general, Steam is selling more through these festivals. So they're doing even more. They're going to see how much can we do. There's going to be way more themed fests still in 2026 and beyond, probably. So that raised us the question. This was a question that I asked the Steam team directly, because I was wrong about something where developers come to me and they're like, yeah, Marnix, what day should I release my game? Because the problem that we see now, for example, looking at the February 2026 month, there's going to be 3 fests plus 1 next fest in there. So there's only going to be 3 days in the entire month, basically, where there is not an event ongoing at Steam. And for a long time, I personally have been of the thought of, okay, look, probably you do not want to, like, if you can avoid it, don't sell your game during a Steam fest, for example, because there is that traditional wisdom of do not launch your Steam game during one of the seasonal sales. Just don't do it. And the reason for this was very clear. I talked about it with Steam team as well, because popular, upcoming, and new and trending are just gone from the store page. These things are not the case for the next fest or for other fests. There will just be additive at the top of the Steam store page, basically a banner, but they do not notice any drop basically in, like, other games that are being launched that are not performing as well in comparison to the games that are part of, like, for example, a themed fest. So the general feedback here, honestly, is do not worry about the fests. Don't launch during a Steam summer sale or a Steam winter sale or any of the spring sales, autumn sale. Just don't launch in the seasonal sales. But apart from that, generally the festivals just launch whenever you feel like your game is ready to launch. Like, I also asked this even more about like Steam Next Fest, and this was something I maybe had a little bit less data for, but they felt like their gut instinct was actually that launching during a Next Fest is good. I know, this seemed very different to me. Now, of course, it's good if you had performed in the previous Next Fest because there are more people coming to Steam. I think launching during a Steam Next Fest is very much a a thing that I would still avoid if you can, but there at least shouldn't be too much of a punishment because there's just an uptick in how many people are coming to Steam because they know, hey, it's Steam Next Fest, which means that also other things like Discovery Queue and all of that will get pushed more as well. One other feature that went live just yesterday, basically, like I was in the talk and they were like, yeah, this is a new feature that should go live in 1 hour from now. It's localized reviews, where now they're going to be showcasing, and this is more for the consumer-facing side of Steam. You as the developer have nothing to say about this. If a game has over 2,000 total reviews, with multiple languages having at least 200 reviews in that specific language, they're only going to focus on showing the reviews in that viewer-specific language and basically give a different review score as well. Like they didn't show certain languages before based on the primary language you selected, but now they're actually going to change, like the very positive or overwhelmingly positive will be language-based as well. This doesn't really matter that much for you guys, the game developers, but this is a good tie-in point to what I want to talk about and what Steam wanted to talk about yesterday as well, which brings us to the topic of localization. Because it's something that I try to hammer on it as much as possible when you guys submit store pages of like, localize your games. It's so important because they brought some stats. They brought some cold hard facts. I think I can put up a picture as well where over 2/3 of Steam does not use English as their primary interface language, which seems kind of nuts, right? That means that if you're making an English-only game and you only check like the English boxes in your language, 66% of Steam is never going to see that game because it's not going to show up in their discovery queue. They have to basically get direct link to it, and then there will be like the big warning of this game is not available in your language, which is that's 2/3 of Steam that you're immediately throwing away. So they have been really hammering once again on localizing. Chinese is actually a bigger language now than English on Steam. It's pretty close. I think it's like 33.6% is Chinese and then 33% is English. But a lot of other languages that you guys often also don't really think about, like Russian is getting more and more important, and Steam is breaking through more and more in some markets. One that I want to talk about and Steam want to talk about as well that I've been noticing because I like live in Japan now, if you didn't know, is that Steam is getting bigger in Japan as well, where for a long time Japan was thought as one of these countries that if you weren't on Nintendo Switch or PlayStation, forget about it, where now they are becoming more and more Steam friendly, or Steam is getting more known. It's not potentially like a giant market right now, but there is still a lot of growth that you can see there. And Steam was once again like, please guys, if you want to make more money, it's very easy. Just localize your game, bring your game out in more languages, and you're going to be able to let the Steam algorithm also do its thing, tap into more markets. Also, I think it's a good thing for you. This is on-Steam related, but we have had good success with localizing our games. Why? Because it also allows you to do things like your content creator outreach, localize that as well. We've seen pretty good success with our games, for example, in Thailand, because we localize our games to Thai, and then you reach out to Thai content creators, and they just get way less games as well. There is way less competition in terms of games that are being submitted to them. Whereas if you're making an English-only roguelike deck builder, yeah, of course, Wonderbots is going to get 5 million of those emails every single week. Whereas if you're making something that's localized, and sure, maybe the content creators will not be as big in terms of raw numbers, or maybe even they are, because there are a lot of, like, I think Thailand, like some influencer with like 10 million subscribers or something covered our games. And there's just, these are dedicated fans, and it's almost, you're giving them a game that they can be excited about because you care about that country, whether it is Poland, whether that is Thailand, whether that is anything else. Localizing your games is extremely important. As for Steam themselves, they have been doing pretty good as well. So that's like one thing they said about us. Well, yeah, look, we have this graph of all of the games releasing every year, basically, and how it goes up. But the Steam revenue graph kind of aligns with that. It's not like Steam is earning less money per game, so to say, but instead, they're still doing very well. Especially 2024 compared to 2023 has been an extremely good year. I don't think I have a picture of that graph, but they did really well, I would say, where compared to 2022 to 2023, there was a downside, and then it basically nearly doubled, and they're looking to even be beating that trend so far for 2025. So it's not like there's no money in Steam. I think that's an important thing as well of, like, it's easy to blame the economy, but they're clearly like, yeah, it's not the economy, because there are still a lot of games that are making success. And they had one very interesting stat that I'm going to pull up here as well, where they looked at new purchases. So basically, how many brand new fresh Steam accounts are there that buy their first game? And that number is way bigger than you expect. It's 109,000 new purchases, as in not like an account buying a game, just like one more for the Steam library. It's new accounts buying their first game. And it's about 109,000 every single day. This is data from 2024, but once again, 2025, they're looking at an even bigger growth in that. So Steam is still growing massively, even in markets that they said, like, you know, they thought were very mature, like, for example, Germany and the United States. There is still a growth in there as well, which, once again, is good for us developers as well. And there was one very fun fact, maybe, because Steam, of course, they had a dedicated section of what is selling well on Steam. And like, is there a cheat code? Is it make incremental games? Is it make horror games? Is it make simulator games or whatever? And generally they're like, no, not really. Their number one advice is if you want to know what sells well on Steam, they have the store.steampower.com/charts URL where you can just see these are the top sellers of every month, basically. And it just shows like these are all of the games. Some of them, of course, are AAA, but a lot of them are games also that are like $20, $30. Some of them are even $5, $3, because Tower Wizard was in there, for example. And that was what they said as well. Like, there is not like a specific genre that does well. Like, Steam games in general do very well. And one stat that I also want to highlight is that out of all of the games, like, I think there were 600 games that grossed over $4 million in the last year, in like the first 30-day period. So 600 games they released, and in the first 30 days, they made over $4 million, which is a pretty decently high number, I would say. Of course, if you compare it to 18,000 games released in total, it may seem very low, but we're going to talk about the slop problem in a second still. But out of all of those games that made $4 million, 25% of those were sub $30 price games, so it wasn't AAA games and whatever. 150 indie games, for the most part, I would say, if you're priced under $30, have still had massive success. Now, are these indie games like what you're developing? Maybe, probably not. It's also, of course, games like Cash Cleaner Simulator and whatever that do have somewhat bigger publishers behind them, like Playwave or a Hooded Horse, for example. But still, I think in general, it is pretty positive for Steam. Now, that brings us to, at least for you and me, the elephant in the room. What about all of the slop on Steam? This is a question that we are worried about a lot, because we have those doom posting graphs of every year, more and more games are getting released. Like right now, I think we're going to be aiming at over 20,000 releases in 2025 on Steam. And it's like, how do you stand out on that? So I went directly to a guy at Valve, and he did not seem amused by my question. I'm sorry if you're watching this. And I asked him, like, what do you think about it? And he gave me a very stern, do you see those games? As an answer. And I was immediately stunned, because no. Steam doesn't see slop games as a problem because they're not on Steam. Not really. We see them because we're looking at like all of the upcoming releases, and we look at not like just the regular popular upcoming, but we look at like the deep down hidden show all upcoming games, and we see how much slop there is as well. The Unity asset flips and all of that. The games with 20 wishlists that clearly had no passion and were just like, oh, I'm gonna make a game, my weekend project, and I'm gonna throw it on Steam. Steam is not really worried about those. And Steam is also like, you shouldn't be worried about those, which I think is a very unique take. But it's a thing that at the end of the day does make a bit sense, because how Steam described it as well is that they are always doing things that are good for developers. That's their whole goal, because that's how they make money. By making developers make more money, they make more money. But that doesn't mean that every change they make is aimed at solving a problem for one specific developer. And I think, unfortunately, some of us fall into that one specific developer category, where overall Steam is improving. We just maybe don't see every single part of that. They said as well of like, look, this is why we have things like those events, for example, to still give you that chance to kind of stand out, get that wish list, and then get into the real Steam. Like, this is where you would find, for example, the discovery queue unlocks after 10 reviews, for example, where a lot of these games do not get to 10 reviews. And they're basically like, look, just make a good game. You have to do all of your marketing and all of that. But if it is an actual game that Steam players want, and you can get it in advance into the eyes of Steam players, and you do real marketing and all of that, you're never going to have to compete with these slop games. These slop games will not be competition for you. Even with things like the Steam Next Fest and whatever, where sure, those first 2 days are maybe unfiltered, it's even there not really a big problem, because then it comes down to the expectations, where they look at, okay, what is user behavior when they see these games? Do they wishlist it? Do they look interested on the page and all of that? And if those signals are not there, well, the games are going to get banished to the Shadow Realm. So he basically said, just don't care about it. I asked him as well, like, is it something you're planning on doing? Because maybe there's like a strain on the servers or whatever of just so many more games coming out and the support system and whatever. And even that, they weren't really worried about it. Like, one thing, of course, was, and he brought this up himself, was like, yeah, some people are like, oh, you have to increase the game for the Steam credits from 100 to like $500 or $1,000 or whatever. Steam is not planning on changing the application credits anytime soon. He said I could quote him on that. So I do believe it, because I think it also isn't an ideal solution, because you're just going to outprice a lot of, for example, Southeast Asian developers, Latin American developers and whatever, and it's not really going to address the slop problem that much. Other things like, for example, more like, you know, reviews as well of like, is this a good enough game, is something that he once again was like, we looked into this, but no, because what he thinks is like, you know, that's the thing as well with Steam. It's a very small team. If you're sending a Steam support request, it goes to like 1 of 15 people or something on the Steam team. It's real people. It's the people who develop Steam that also do those support requests. It's not like outsourced to like some company far away. They don't have the scale to start determining what is a good enough game for Steam. And they were also like, look, we're not going to become the police of what's a good game, yes or no. Some games they saw and they're like, wow, this is a bad game. But then the games perform really well on Steam, and that's what they care about as well, because clearly they didn't see it, but clearly there was an audience for it as well on Steam. That's why they do more of those niche festivals, I would say, as well, like the Horse Fest, like the Ocean Fest and whatever, because there are just so many different communities on Steam. I'm more worried about you guys uploading slop, more of the... less because of the fact of like, oh, you're flooding Steam, because Steam themselves is like, yeah, it's not an issue actually. And more of a thing of like, you uploading slop, it's only deluding yourself that like, oh yeah, I'm a real game developer now, without actually learning a lot about the game development process. I think a final thing, just to look into the future, what is Steam planning next? It's definitely a front-end overhaul. And some of those things you may have noticed, like for example, the update to the Steam store page now being wider, the Steam trailer being a more modern player, basically with way better feedback and whatever, and then being able to upload direct videos and WebM files instead of purely GIFs. So you finally no longer have to fight like getting your GIFs compressed without them looking completely blown out and all of that, and you can just upload like 720p videos instead and put those onto the store page. And they're planning a few more store page improvements. I'm actually not certain that I can talk about all of them right now, but they're planning some cool stuff, and normally, stay tuned, click that subscribe button, like and subscribe, whatever. They should give Bite Me Games early access to then make a video as well about like a setup tutorial about what they're doing and all of that. So stay tuned for that, because there is some more cool stuff coming that I think would help make Steam a better platform for developers, more centralized and all of that. So cool stuff is coming. I think right now they are definitely focusing more on, one, the Steam UI update, and then 2, also events. They want to go even more on events, not just their own custom ones, but also events from third parties and whatever, where so far in 2025, so a little bit over half, they've done 200 separate Steam events. So that's not just from them, but it's also, for example, the Hooded Horse, like Tacticon and all of that, and like other special themed sales that are done by third parties, or like games made in Germany and whatever. Right now, it's a bit of a free-for-all, because every request is still very manual, but they're looking at probably by 2026 changing it a little bit, changing the way that festivals work, because they have then a better idea. Because it's 200 that got selected. There's a lot of Steam events as well that just didn't make it, basically, that they do want to solve at some point. So overall, you know, I got my Steam t-shirt. This is what I pay my 30% Steam cut for. I think it was a very, very good talk with them. I always like, honestly, it's my favorite part of coming to Gamescom and DevCon is being able to talk with Steam. And, you know, other people as well, because they host a breakfast in Cologne where you can go and talk to them. You can just hop around. They're super personal, super nice guys. So events like this, you know, maybe I'm very happy now. It's like, you know, yeah, the 30% they get, they deserve it, because they are very open and very nice to other developers. Maybe in a month from now when we release the next game and I just have to see how much I have to pay to them, it's a different story, but I really do like Steam in the way that they're going, at least. And I think they also answered some of the questions that I was dealing with, that you wouldn't be able to open a Steam support ticket for normally. Like, what should we do about the Steam slop problem? Because, like they said, do you see a slop problem? Not really. So with that out of the way, thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye! Big shout out once again to Xsola, who made this coverage possible and sponsoring my event coverage here. I have some great news for you if you're a game developer and you're looking into earning more money. As in the wake of the Apple versus Epic court ruling, mobile game developers are now able to link to external payment platforms from their apps in comparison to having to rely on, for example, the Apple's built-in payment platform, which takes 30%, which is a very high amount of money to take. This allows you to retain way more revenue whilst also being able to streamline the experience for your players, whether they're buying from mobile, from PC, or from any other platform basically. And the good thing is you can get started with minimal setup today by integrating either the Xsola buy button or the Xsola web shop in your applications as well. There's a link down below that gives you a bit more information of how it all works. So thank you very much for Xsola for sponsoring the video, and thank you very much for watching it.